but I started to dream things. I mean, not like we're saying dreaming about visions and what you want to do with your life, but dreams at nighttime. Um, and I would say that there is a difference between the dreams that seem to be helping our brain to sort things out or let go of stress or whatever, when things are very symbolic and very mixed and very complex, to these dreams, because they were very lucid and extremely clear and very still. So one of the dreams was, for example, New Zealand, and a vision of New Zealand, like a map of New Zealand, and it would just sit there all night, for example. Um, and eventually, I figured out that okay, I should probably go to New Zealand, um, and I didn't have any other reason to go there except this dream. So I found someone who could stay in the farm and mind the animals, and I had a boyfriend back then, and he was quite clear that if you go on a trip for 3 months without even knowing why, and you're going on your own, and all you say is that you're dreaming about a map at night, it's like this is too much for me. You have to choose between me and this trip, and it was very obvious to me that I would have to choose to travel. Um, and I think these little choices, I wouldn't say it's a little choice at the time, but these crossroads that they keep coming. It's like there is always another path to take that will bring you back to society and what is expected, and then there is this other call from the wild or call from the unknown that pulls you in another direction. And I guess everyone has that to some extent, and in my case it has been very strong. The pull that something has to happen and something has to be done, or it's been extremely strong. And also being a woman, because sometimes you have to be quite forceful to really carry things through and take risks and do uncomfortable things, like this first winter in the forest is uncomfortable. And I don't know, but I have this thought that if I was a man, I wouldn't be as questioned about it. I would probably be seen as brave or innovative or whatever. Like it would be seen as a sort of positive quality. But as a woman, you quite often get to hear, but don't you want to settle down? And are you not planning to have children? Or how do you see the future? You're expected to look at the consequences and be much more cautious. And I think if I was a man, perhaps people would have cheered me on a bit more. I don't know. I mean, since I'm not a man, I can't compare to that. But this is thought in my mind. Because when these things pulls you, I chose to follow them because I felt that there was no choice. There was no way to resist it. So if there is a pull to go to New Zealand, I go to New Zealand, because anything else would be more difficult than that. And when I when I came to New Zealand, I had a dream also that I needed to go to the far east. Of the North Island. I only dreamt about the North Island, so so this is very embarrassing, but I think I should say it. I was sitting on just to see how naive you can be. I was sitting on the plane to New Zealand, and the person next to me says, "Oh, so are you going to the North or the South Island?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know there was two." Horrible. Anyway, so I go to New Zealand, and one thing led to the other, and I realized that my only way would be to hitchhike, because I never have any money, and we actually skipped Ireland, that came first, but where the hitchhiking started. We might go back there eventually. Anyway, and I get to the far east coast of the North Island and come to a tribe of Maori people, and they just look at me like I just sort of walk into their community, and they say, "Oh, there you are. We were expecting you. We just thought you would be a little bit older." And that was the first time in my life I met people and I realized that they had seen the same dream and they had seen me in it, and to them the dream time was as real as any other reality. It was not strange at all to them that we met in that way. I guess they would have been more surprised if I wouldn't have turned up. And that was fascinating, to meet people that up until then I had followed all these callings because I couldn't deny them, but I was always on my own doing it. And now I met a whole culture of people that said this is all normal, and I didn't need to explain anything at all because they could already see it. They already knew what I was thinking, or they already knew where I came from. That was truly amazing, and I'm very grateful for that.
But still, you didn't stay there forever.
No.
You were there for a couple of months.
Yes, because there was always, this angry little horse living in this tiny little muddy farm that I had to come back to. And I think it's good. If I didn't have her, I don't think I would have stayed in Sweden. Because I seem to fit in better everywhere else but here. But she was here. And by the time she passed, at the age of 35, and, I was well grown up by then. Then I had settled here in a way that now I wouldn't want to leave this base. I'm fine with it, but I still it's I always fit in better somewhere else. It's true.
So what was your learnings or insights the more at New Zealand, besides belonging to someone and not being alone?
Well, I remember one of the first conversations we had with this first tribe that I met. And they said, well, it's good work that you talk to animals and all that. But then they were upset that I had left out plants. And that was really... I realized I was ashamed that I had left them out. I realized that. It's also much more complex with plants because... where does one individual begin and end, and the whole cycle of life and death is so different. When you have seeds or you grow through roots, and when does the consciousness split, and where do you say that there is one soul and the next soul? Very fascinating, and very abstract and difficult also for the human mind, I think. But it also became very complicated to eat, because up until that point it was like, okay, I'm a vegetarian and then I don't have to eat someone. It's like, okay, I'm a vegetarian and I'm eating someone all the time. It's like, okay, so you have to accept that there is a cycle of life and death, and other individuals will die so that you can live, and one day you will die so that someone else can live. And you better accept it or fight against it if you want to, but it's still going to be there. So that was a bit harsh. But I was traveling a bit back and forth to New Zealand the way I remember it. And because I don't think it was on that first trip, I think it came a little bit later, that I had a very clear dream when I was in New Zealand. And the question was there, do you need to use dominance in the handling of animals? And I had this dream about a completely different tribe of people. They didn't look like Maoris. They were more fair-skinned and a little bit reddish type hair, I would say. And they lived in a forest, and I could understand that this is way back. It was almost like outside of time, like as if you would have counted time on another scale. It's hard to explain, really. Like another next door dimension, sort of. And this group of people, they didn't have a language, because they didn't need to. In a way, now when I look at it afterwards, it would be more like any other species or the animals, that since there is no difference between me and the outside world, it's all in me and I'm all in it, we have an immediate understanding. And therefore they were very peaceful. Because if you would start a fight, of course, this entire state of being would disappear, and that was the state of being they knew of. It was just the way it was. And I realized later, well, this must be what I'm looking for. I didn't understand it then, but I understood it afterwards. This is actually the key to the entire journey of discovering what is the opposite of domination then. If we take away domination and manipulation, what do we have? We take away the line, we take away the hierarchy. What do we have? Well, we have this actually. And in this dream, this tribe, somehow they get the news from other species in the forest that another type of people are entering this forest where they lived. And that those people would come with war and a completely different culture. And they knew that they would never be able to fight back because it wasn't in their nature to fight. So they couldn't fight anyway. They would have to somehow withdraw. This is a hard part to explain. You know, in dreams, things are not that difficult to understand because they just are. Wait. But it's like, you could say that they would be killed, massacred, and they would vanish that way. But you could also say that perhaps that is what happened. I wouldn't know. But it was like they started to live behind another curtain. Like the way we would see spirits of the forest or you know, fairies or this type of forest manifestations, perhaps. I don't know, but it was like that. But before they disappeared, because they knew that this is going to happen, we're not going to be able to stay here in this reality anymore. So what they decided to do was to leave a trace of the memory of this way of life, of this time and of this way of life, for the next world to be able to remember. And what they did in the dream, this is very, very clear dream. They decided to, all of them, everyone in this tribe, would put these wordless memories into a rock, a small little black rock. And they would talk into this, they would tell it into this rock, so it would be kept. And it was a very clear image of this stone. It was about the size of a hand, and it was shaped so that it would fit perfectly into the hand, even with little hollows for the fingers. And then there would be a little white circle on the top, like a tiny white stripe of a circle around the top of it. Very clear image of that stone. And then after they did this, there was a young man who was given the mission to carry this stone somewhere else. And this man was then running through the forest in a zigzag pattern, I guess to shake off any followers. And then he came to this very high mountain with this rock. And there he was met by a moa bird. And the moa birds are extinct. They're not alive anymore. They were huge and living in New Zealand, like huge hens. They couldn't really fly, and they were it's a lot of meat, and they were quite easy to catch. So they were killed off for food, basically. But anyway, at that time they existed. So this man, or exist, I guess they did in physical form, but it was also like this moa bird was coming from another, also from like behind a curtain in a way. Anyway, the man handed over the stone to the moa bird, who then hid it in a way so not even the man himself would know where to find it. Because the best way to hide something that cannot be changed over time is to forget about it. If you can't remember it, you can't change it. So he would never be able to find the stone. So the moa bird takes a stone. The man takes a leap off this mountain, and you expect him to fall down and die, but it's like he just disappears out of the mountain, out into the air, and is sort of vanishing into thin air. And that's the end of the dream. And it was very... it left me with a very sort of strong and almost sad, but I can't describe the feeling actually that dream left with me. So I didn't know what to do, if I should fall asleep the next night or if this was a bit much. Anyway, so the next night completely different dream. Next night I dream about a map, like a map. You unfold a map. One of those maps that you use for, they're very detailed, like you could use them for, I don't know, when you have to do something in the far forest camping or whatever. Very detailed. And on the map you can clearly see a river, and next to the river there is a path, and if I follow this path I will find what I look for. Okay. And at that point I was staying in a woman's house close to Lake Taupo, I remember. And she said, well, my daughter's done a lot of hiking and I know she has this stack of maps. Maybe we should go through them. And we found this stack of maps. The daughter was abroad somewhere. And we find the exact map. I mean, we find it. The river is there, the pathway is there, the whole thing is there. And, and then this woman says, well, this is all fine, but the area of this river and this pathway is really not safe. You can't go in there. It's like, why not? No, because this area is considered unsafe for very many reasons. First of all, it's only Maoris living in there and they don't let white people in, so forget about it. If you don't have a contact, they will never let you in. And letting someone in is not only like someone standing on a border saying you can't enter, because there are gravel roads going through and they probably wouldn't stop you. They could be hostile, but they wouldn't stop you. But you will not be able to enter into the part of the journey where these events could take place, because those doors would be closed. And for that to happen, you need a blessing. And you would never get a blessing based on this, because I don't have any contacts in this community. And she said, and then there is another thing. And it's said that in this area, the walls between the worlds are so thin that people die, they disappear. Lots of people disappear, and the tourist board don't know what to do about it. They usually blame the mist, but they're never found again, and it's really a mystery. It's like people go in and they don't come out. And so going in without a blessing on your own in the forest, you can't do it. And I realized, again, it's logic versus this calling. So I realized with my logic that this is impossible, and I'm not a very brave person. I'm terrified most of the time, and I was really scared. I mean, I'm scared a lot, many times every day, but I don't think it's few times in life I've been so scared as I was when I realized that I have to do this anyway. Because I was battling it with myself, and she tried to contact people that she knew, and it's like, is there any way to get a blessing, to get someone to say it's okay? And it's like, no, there was no everywhere. They contacted the elders of tribes, and they said, no, don't let her in here. It's stupidity. It's dangerous, and we don't want to take responsibility for someone disappearing. They said even when they are outside themselves in this forest, they have little ropes between the kids. I mean, the Maoris themselves. Later on, I got to know a man who grew up there, and they always had a little rope between them when they went for walks, because someone could disappear. And he had an uncle that disappeared and came back 2 weeks later with no memory of what happened. So there's something about time and that place. That's all that can be said about it, really. And so there was this struggle between the pull and the logic, and as we know, the pull is going to win, as it does, and as usual, I didn't have any money, and I had to hitchhike into this wilderness area by myself, probably with a grey face of fear, and I remember the last man I talked to before doing that, he said that, well, I think you just have to do it, because maybe the blessing will come if you start. It's again, you have to leap before. But this is the best I can say. It's like, I guess you just have to do it. And I took that as a sign. So I remember going to the mall the day before to get food, because I had no idea how long I would be away for, and I had a backpack. And I needed to buy all this dried fruit that you can cook in these little cookers you have when you're camping. and this tiny little tent, and I saw everyone else shopping for the whatever Friday dinner with family, and it's like, what food are you supposed to buy when you go into a timeless zone when you're not supposed to? Sort of pushing the trolley along this shop, trying to figure that out. That was funny now afterwards, but then I was just scared. And then early in the morning I went out on the road to see if I could get a ride. There are no buses in this area. It's very, very remote. And most of it is gravel road. And the first car that stopped was this young Maori hunter, and he was really good looking. So I forgot everything else and just got into the car. And we started to drive, and he was going for a pig hunt. And he said, okay, so what are you doing in this forest all by yourself? I said, well, I'm following a dream. And he's like, okay. And he's quiet. And then he says, well, there was a time when the old people could remember who the children was before they were born. So when they came into life, they would immediately be met with someone who knew who they were. And then when the right age came, they would get the right teaching to be able to fulfill their destiny. But nowadays, no one can remember anymore. And then I went with him for quite a short while, and then he was taking off somewhere and he dropped me off. And I really remember standing, because this was really dusty road, and I was standing next to the road with this little backpack in this cloud of dust that this car left behind, and realizing that how lucky I was. I'd always seen my upbringing as so harsh, and that I would sort of be where I was despite of that. But then I realized that perhaps it is because of that, because I realized that even in the most difficult times, there was actually always someone who would see, even if it was just for a second, like my grandmother, who would say, no, it's normal. I see what you see, and it's normal. And that's enough. You don't need someone to be with you every day, 24 hours, giving you confirmation. It's enough if someone really, truly does it once in a while. So I remember shouting up to the sky, loud, because I was anyway alone. Thank you to my grandmother, to all my ancestors actually, for seeing me. And I realized that I'd never before said thank you to them in that way, and I didn't even realize that I could. So that was the first part, and then I waited for the next car to come, and it took a while, obviously. And then the second one was a carpenter, a white man, a carpenter. And he said, oh, you're going in here? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm sure you heard stories about how horrible people are in here, and that you need to be careful. And I said, yeah, these people are perhaps tough, but they're not so tough really. They're just very honest. So if you don't want to see yourself, you will have problems. But really, you don't need to worry. And that took away all the fear that was put onto me culturally. This ancient fear of white people and the wild natives, or the dark and the white skinned and all of that I had sort of, I'd taken that in, even if I didn't think I would. And he put that right again by just, these are humans. They are people. You know, they are just perhaps unusually honest. And then he was going to the last town. After that, there was no more town. It was only, then starts the gravel roads. So very few cars was, of course, going in that direction. And it took a while before anyone picked me up. And the ones who stopped was like a Volkswagen bus. And in this bus, there were one driver, and in the back there were three elderly Maori people, and they were giggling. It's like when Maori people giggle, you have to. It's really contagious. You never know what they're giggling about. Probably it's about you, but it doesn't matter, because it's just very warm and present in a way. So they were giggling, and in I went. and they explained that they were going halfway. And halfway is a long way. I mean, these are now miles and miles and miles of gravel road. And we talk and a little bit, and they say, "Oh, where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm." I explained about the river and the pathway, and I said, "Oh, where do you come from?" "I come from Sweden." "Okay." And they keep giggling, and we get halfway, and they stop the car, and I go out, and I'm standing outside, and I've just closed the door to this bus, and then the driver winds down the window and said, "Where did you say you came from again?" I said, "It's Sweden." It's like, "Well, if you've come all the way around the planet to follow a dream, I think we can help you. We know which river you're talking about. We know the pathway. We actually come from that village originally. So we decided we'll take you all the way there." And they do. And then there's this old lady, and she says, "Oh, have a sandwich. You know, it's I used to be out on adventures when I was young, and you should eat now because you never know what's going to happen." And all these sort of things. And then we stop. We're getting closer to the place where the river begins, and they stop and say, "Wait a minute, we'll just stop here for a while. You stay in the car." And they go out, and they come back like half an hour later. And they say, "Okay, now we talk to the people here, and they have accepted your way in," which means that I actually got the blessing. And then they drove me to the beginning of this river and the pathway, and they said, "Okay, from now on you don't need us anymore. Now you're just following your dream." And they disappeared. So I think that just that journey sums up all the others. We don't really need to talk about any other trips, because it's all, if that isn't the journey, what is, in a way. And then I walked into this forest, and they had explained to me that about the mist. If the mist comes, you don't move, and you wait for the mist to disappear, so you will remain exactly in the same place. That's important. And if anyone calls your name, you don't follow the voices. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? 2 things. So I start to walk, and this is now afternoon. I mean, I started early in the morning. We are now probably a few hours away from darkness. And I start to walk, and it's beautiful. It's breathtaking forest, and this river, and I'm amazed by the whole thing. So I forget to be scared, and I'm walking barefoot, always barefoot, because it's like I have close connection to the ground. I can feel every step. I remind myself of where I am and who I am. I'm not going to disappear. And then I hear someone calling Emelie. And I'm thinking that, okay, well, you're not really supposed to follow voices. I get that. But you can hear the river very clearly. So, I mean, I should be able to find my way back to the river, if nothing else, even if I follow the voice just for a little bit. So I follow the voice, and that takes me to a white, quite big rock. And in this rock, without being able to explain how, I can see circles of different species, like a circle of animals, a circle of plants, a circle of rocks, a circle of water, of humans, and it's like all the creations that was ever me is visible inside of this rock, which means that I know who I am, and I also know what I'm not, that I'm all that, and still I'm none of that. Yes, when you enter timeless places, what happens is that you can so easily get lost, because the chronological time will not bring you back. I guess that's in a way why you get lost, because there is no chronological path back to where you began from. So whatever you happen to identify yourself with is where you're going to end up. And that's the danger of it, I suppose, because you can then really get lost. But I guess that's also how we all the time get lost. when we believe that what we see and feel and know about ourselves is our only reality, we are in a way always constantly lost. It's just that perhaps we don't get reminded of it. So it made me feel very safe. And it wasn't difficult at all to actually find the way back to the path. And I was just very, very grateful for this insight of knowing what you are without ever being able to describe it, and this sense of, I don't know, sort of joy and some sort of inner security, safe. I don't know how to describe it really. And now it's the sun is going down and it's getting this grayish light. And I'm deciding to then find a place to pinch up my little tent, this one-man tiny tent. So you can put it anywhere. So I'm walking there and looking for a place to put the tent, and then I hear the voices again. And this time I'm not afraid to follow them at all, because it went well the last time. So I'm thinking that I probably should follow them. So I do. And I follow these voices for a while, straight into the forest, off the path. I've left my things, the tent and everything else, and I just follow these voices straight into the midst of its dense forest. And it's getting dark. So by the time I arrive where I'm supposed to be, it's dark, and it's a tiny stream, very very small stream in this forest. And I sit down next to the stream, and I can remember this feeling as if it's happening again. And I was putting my feet down in this very cold water, and I'm looking at these pebbles at the bottom of the stream, and then my eyes get sort of stuck on a tiny black pebble. So, and I put my hand down in this icy cold water to take this little pebble out, and I can't get it out because it's stuck. And I have to dig around it to get it out. And I get it out, and I'm holding in my hand a black stone with a pointed top with a white circle on it that perfectly fits a hand. And now is when my world is falling apart for good. Because if this item in a dream appear as real, and how on earth would you ever be able to find it in this huge forest area, in the bottom of a stream, in the middle of nowhere? None of this is possible. So if it is possible, then the world just can't be what I thought it was up until now. That we can say. Should we make a pause there, perhaps? I don't know.
That is an amazing story, really. And I can't help think about the movie you can make about it, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, it is even now when I'm telling it, it's still, and I remember writing it down. It's like, this can't have happened, but it happened, and it happened just like that. And I mean, I've met some of the people afterwards, and that have been involved along the way, and they can confirm it too. But really, and what happened was that I managed to, I have no idea how, get back from the little stream back to finding the tent and my things. I was kind of sleeping that night with this sort of rock next to me. I had no idea what to do with it. And the following morning, I took it down to the river. I decided to just sort of the big river. I was just sitting there with it, and sort of, what is inside this rock really? And what came that morning was a tone, like a very almost like a shy kind of vague melody, not dramatic at all, quite monotonous in a way. And I realized that what is kept in this stone is the vibrational memory of a time where there really was no hierarchy, and when people were able to live like other species live today. And I realized that it is possible.
Could you please give some examples of, I mean, we are so up in the hierarchy today, so we might not even know that we are in it. Could you just give some examples of?
No, I think that what happens when in a hierarchy, and the difference of value puts everything in a competition with everything else. So something is perceived as beautiful because something else is less beautiful. Something is higher because something else is lower. We give things an immediate meaning and place it inside an order that will then limit our way of totally experiencing the other one on the inside. I think sometimes when Christianity says that in order to perceive paradise you have to become a child, perhaps that's another way of expressing it. Because what is it with the child's mind is that you wouldn't know what you're seeing. You wouldn't be able to distinguish it in that way that it makes a difference, and you wouldn't start comparing it in a way that makes it more or less valuable in comparison to anything else. And I think when you get to that point, it could appear as abstract, and it's like, well, how can you live then if there's no difference and no time and no, well, how could you live then? That's the question. And these people could. I mean, they lived, they were children, they were adults, they had children, they grew old, and they died in a slightly different cycle because they didn't seem to look at the difference of life and death as we do, which some Horses Like Funny explains too, that perhaps eventually we will wear down this threshold that makes the distinction between life and death so strong, and it will just be a continuous cycle because we remain awake. That's another way of looking at it. But since any description of it, even I try to describe it now, I will belittle it. Any word will belittle it. It's like when Taoists say that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. What happens if eternity and matter would merge into one constant presence? Is that when the linear time dissolves? And that could be quite a beautiful community. That could be a completely different way of living on this planet. For reasons that I still don't understand and never thought about, until I told this story to a friend of mine quite shortly after it happened. It took 3 days to walk out. How could it take 2 hours to walk in and 3 days to walk out? My friend said. I have no idea. Because it just appeared very natural at the time. When we talk about when time dissolves. And there are legends in this area that there are another people living kind of next doors. The name of the people living, the physical people living in there is the children of the mist, because they grow up with the mist, so they are naturally the children of the mist. And sometimes they say there are red-haired children born in these tribes, because the people on the other side of the mist mix with them. So they are aware of people living behind the curtain which are more fair-skinned and red-haired. Is that the same people that I saw in the dream? And is this stone something that could materialize and getting across this curtain? I don't know. There must be a connection between these stories. It's helpful that I didn't know of that before I went in, so I know it's not a figure of my imagination, having heard it before. So I truly believe that all the stories those people have that might sound like legends or fairy tales in a Western society, that they are, in my ears, real, physical and real as this table in this reality.
So what happened with the stone, the black stone?
Well, the black stone, I didn't know what to do with it because I felt it's not mine. I mean, I picked this up, but it's not for a person. I mean, what do I do with it? And it's here. And the lovely thing about it was also that it was so common looking. I mean, if I wouldn't have dreamt this dream, I would just have walked straight across it, because we tend to look for what is extraordinary and remarkable and stunning. And it's like any grey stone that we find could have this history. It's amazing if you think about it. And I guess that way it was also in a way kept safe, because no one would ever choose to pick it up. Why would they, sort of? But now it was with me, and I had to do something with it, but I had no idea what. So it ended up going back to Sweden with me, because I figured out I found it, and unless I get a real sort of clear, I mean, it was so clear how to find it. So thinking, well, I hopefully I will also get some some signals what to do with it. Oi. I'm drinking this honey lemon type of tea in a huge mug, if you could see it, so it would last through the interview, and I obviously need it. So my thought is, I'm taking it home until there is a sign, because it felt like the only respectable thing to do.